It is so wonderful to see you all here at Nerd Nite. If you couldn't tell, this is my first time hosting it. That's why I stood on the ground and in the darkness. Um, but, that tracks for me. It is wonderful to see all your lovely faces here. Before we get started, let's be grateful. Nerd Nite is brought to you by Ann Arbor District Library. Woohoo! Where I am an employee. My name is Jacob, by the way. We also want to give a big old thank you to Live for hosting us and letting us have this event here. Please buy the drinks, buy the food, and tip, tip, tip. Last but not least, let's welcome all. Let's thank all of y'all for coming and being nerds. And of course, our lovely speakers, who I will briefly introduce before tonight's Nerd Nite Minute. So this evening, we have David Robinson, who will be talking to us about how galaxies are made. We have Jody Harnish, Keeping Time Behind the Iron Curtain, a visual history of Soviet watchmaking. So Jody is a library employee, so library people, whoop whoop. And we have Esteban Tuma, who's going to give us a conversation about the Spanish conquest, how the Americas were taken by Columbus, Cortez, and a handful of other idiots. When I was reading it online, it said, in a handful of other, idiots. And that was the F word. So, very excited for tonight. But before we get started, I have something to tell you. This is your Nerd Nite Minute. Oh. So I'm going to talk to you about how today's biggest pop star may or may not have gotten the mayor of New York City indicted on federal corruption charges. It's kind of crazy, but it's an intersection of all my favorite interests. You get some Catholicism, you get, pop music, you get money. Very, very fun. So this is Sabrina Carpenter. She is currently, I would say, the biggest pop star in the world. If I remember the fact correctly, she has three singles in the Billboard Top 10, which is a record for a solo female artist. Just to give you some context here, chances are if you've been to a Forever 21 or a gas station, or if you've driven a car recently, you've heard Sabrina Carpenter. That's that Me Espresso. A little background about her, she, much like a Miley Cyrus or a Demi Lovato, she came right out of the Disney Channel machine and then into pop provocateur. So that's Sabrina Carpenter, famous singer. This is the Blessed Virgin Mary Church in Brooklyn, New York City. As you can tell, it's a very beautiful church. Over here is Monsignor Jaime Gigantiello. I'm going to call him Monsignor. But this man, basically, Sabrina Carpenter's team was like, hey, can I come film a music video in your church? He was like, yeah, totally. Come and film the music video. But then later on, he told the press, I only told her she could film outside the church. That's how we know this man is fishy, because she was very much inside the church. And if you think about it, millions of dollars goes into something like filming a music video. Hundreds of people, choreography, costumes, makeup. They were up in that church for many days. There is no way that this man did not know that. So he's already on the fishy, it's suspect. So naturally the video pissed off the Catholics. So here's some images from the video. You'll see a blue pastel coffin that says R.I.P. bitch. You will see some other R.I.P. business over there. Here you'll see Sabrina Carpenter standing amongst a bunch of bloody dead men. So I don't know. I grew up Catholic, I can say we did not love this happening. And we especially didn't love it when she was dropping it low on some pastel coffins on the altar. Monsignor was pissed. So, the Monsignor was pissed, but not really the Monsignor wasn't pissed. The bishop, or the archbishop of the Brooklyn diocese was like, Monsignor, why did you do that? And he was like, she could only film outside, ha 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 ha. Which is a bunch of baloney, which we already discussed. So, here's some of the other actors in our play. On the right, you'll see Frank Carone. He is the chief of staff for the New York City Mayor, Eric Adams. So with Sabrina Carpenter being so big and being so popular, and when this drama about, you weren't supposed to be up in the church, dropping it low on the coffins, et cetera, garnered a lot of attention in the media. Also, with such a rabid fan base that Sabrina Carpenter has, they were talking about it online. So a lot of attention was brought to this kind of kerfluffle, which of course attracted the attention of the federal government. So they're like, if the Monsignor is gonna cut a check with Sabrina Carpenter to do this, what else is going on with his finances? So they investigate the Monsignor. When they investigate the Monsignor, they're like, okay, the Monsignor is giving a lot of money, or there's something fishy between the Monsignor and Frank Carone. And then they're like, Frank Carone, he's the chief of staff for New York City Mayor Eric Adams. So you'll see how we move from one person to the next person as the feds are investigating all these people. So Eric Adams is indicted on charges of corruption, campaign fraud, bribery, all this stuff. And basically, that attention was brought all because of Sabrina Carpenter dropping it low on a pink pastel coffin. So that is how that happened. Thank you. Thank you. So I would like to introduce our next presenter, but okay, I can read that. Our next presenter is David Robinson. He is a physics graduate student in his last year at the University of Michigan. Let's clap for that, last year, come on. Outside of physics, he enjoys reading novels, playing piano, solving crossword puzzles, and learning to cook new things. Those are all awesome things. Let's give it up for David. Here's your mic and here's your clicker.
Okay. So, sadly, the story I have to tell you is much less exciting than the one you just heard, but sadly, the story I have to tell you is much less exciting than the one you just heard, but it does also involve stars. Okay. Thank you. Yes, so as Jacob said, I'm David. I'm a graduate student in physics at the University of Michigan here in Ann Arbor, and I'm excited to tell you about some of what I work on in studying how galaxies form. And so, to start off with, what is a galaxy? And so this is a picture taken from the foot of Mount Etna in Italy of the Milky Way. It's this band of stars across the center of this image. I don't know why it's called Milky. It really doesn't look very milky in this image. Now, has anybody here ever been somewhere where the night sky is dark enough that you can see the Milky Way? Awesome. I'm a little jealous. I really want to see it someday. And, what we see is just this path, but we think that if you were able to get outside of it, it would look something like this. A disk with spiral arms. It's spinning in the direction of the spiral arms. There's a band at the center. Our entire solar system sits in one of these spiral arms. I'm not pointing at where it actually is. And so we just see this streak across the sky because we're inside the disk. And so if you look in just the right direction, you see a lot of stars. And if you look in any other direction, you hardly see anything at all. And of course, this is our galaxy, but there are many, many others. And so one of the reasons that we know that is that scientists take some of our most powerful telescopes, and in particular the James Webb Space Telescope, which has been in the news a lot over the past year, and you can just point it at a tiny patch of the sky where you can't see anything with the naked eye, and you just let the telescope stare at that single patch of sky for hours and hours. And with the James Webb Telescope, you end up with this image. Now, the things in this image that have 6 spikes pointing out of them are stars, but everything else in the image is a galaxy. And so there are thousands of them in this image. And this is just a tiny patch of the sky, so there are many, many more. And one of the really cool things about this image is that we can see that there are many different types of galaxies. There are a few that look kind of like the Milky Way, a relatively flat disk, and you can even make out spiral arms in a few. Some are red, some are blue, some are yellow, although please take all of the colors in this image with a grain of salt. So the Webb telescope sees in infrared the same thing that you would see if you were wearing night vision goggles, which it does not look like anybody is right now. And so the things that look redder in this image actually are redder, but they're not red. And so as a physicist, when I look at this image, I really want to understand, where do these galaxies come from? How do they form? And importantly, how do we end up with the wide variety of galaxies that you see in this image? And so to answer that, it helps to think about what the universe looked like long ago before any of these galaxies formed. And luckily, we can do that. We have the baby picture of the universe. It looks like this. And so this is the oldest light that we can see in the universe. It comes from about 400,000 years after the beginning of the universe and the Big Bang. And this shows how hot the universe was in various places. So the red spots are a little bit hotter, and the blue spots are a little bit colder. And when I say a little bit, I really mean a little bit. The variation from red to blue in this image is about 1 part in 10,000. And to put that in perspective, that's about 1 second compared to 3 hours. And so the reason why it looks like this is that at some places in the very early universe, there was just a little bit more stuff. And in some places, there was a little bit less stuff. And so when there's a little bit more stuff, the universe is a little hotter. And when there's a little less stuff, the universe is a little colder. And so what we really want to understand is, how do we go from this, where we have tiny variations in how much stuff there is, to this, where the universe is mostly empty space with all of these galaxies in the middle of it. And really, the short answer to that question is just one word: gravity. The same thing that's holding you onto your chairs or the floor right now is also the thing that holds galaxies together. And so when you have a spot where there's a little bit more stuff in the very early universe, gravity likes to clump stuff together, so it's going to pull more and more matter towards those initial spots, and that's going to continue and continue. And so we can visualize it a little like this, of, say, we start with some initial cloud of stuff, and stuff, as it generally is bouncing around, moving at different speeds in different directions, and gravity is going to squeeze this cloud, so it gets smaller. But of course, when you squeeze it, these little bits and pieces are going to start bumping into each other. And as they bump into each other, they're going to start moving faster. And so they're going to get hotter. And that makes it harder to squeeze. And so this is a problem, because we can't just keep squeezing it, because it's just going to resist gravity more and more. Now, what I study is how this matter is able to cool down, release some of that energy, and be able to clump. But it turns out that even with that, you couldn't form all of these galaxies. Gravity would just work too slowly. And so the way out of it is, it turns out that as far as we know, there's all the normal matter that makes up us, everything in this room, the Earth, the sun, every planet and every star that we can see, and then there's 5 times as much matter that's completely invisible to us. We can't see it at all, and the only reason that we know about it is because of gravity. And so we call this mysterious stuff dark matter. And dark matter is great for forming galaxies, because when we squeeze it, it doesn't collide with itself. So gravity can squeeze it really fast, and it'll clump really fast. And so that makes this whole process easier, because dark matter is going to form nice big clumps, and then we can clump up normal matter a little more slowly, And now we have these nice big clumps of dark matter and normal matter that are held together by gravity. And that's great, but that's not what we see in this image. Right now, we just have boring clumps of matter, but we need to make stars so that it glows, and we also need to make all the weird shapes of galaxies that you see in this image. And luckily, gravity helps us with that too, because even once we've formed these big clumps of matter, gravity doesn't stop. It keeps going. And one of the things that it does is form stars. And so if you squeeze normal matter enough, it gets really, really hot, and eventually it ignites and forms stars. And in the interior of these stars is a factory that makes new elements. And so this is an image of a region where stars are forming, again, through the James Webb Space Telescope. And you can see all these, the stars that are bluer are young stars that have just formed. And so these stars are great because, A, we need a star. If we didn't have the sun, things would really not be going well for us. And these stars make the things like carbon in our bodies, the oxygen that we breathe, all of that. And when these stars run out of fuel, they stop glowing. And if they're big enough, much bigger than our sun, when they run out of fuel, they explode in the most dramatic explosions in the universe called supernovas that leave these bubbles like this. And these supernovas are great because A, they make these giant bubbles of hot gas around them where all sorts of interesting stuff can happen. And they spread all of the nice things like carbon and oxygen that the stars have made. And these explosions are so high in energy that they can actually create a bunch of things that are only made in these supernovas. So for example, uranium can only be produced inside these supernovas. And so this is what happens when gravity keeps on squeezing matter inside of galaxies. But what about when we think on larger scales than galaxies? And there, gravities are really big. Galaxies are really big and contain a lot of matter, so gravity is going to pull them towards each other. And sometimes it's going to pull them so much that two galaxies will merge together into one galaxy. And this is really like in this image. And this is really important because it lets us make bigger and bigger galaxies. And today we actually see large numbers of galaxies that don't merge together, but just combine and form a galaxy cluster, which is exactly what it sounds like. And also, these mergers can create all sorts of interesting and surprising shapes. So if you start with two nice disk galaxies that look like the Milky Way, when they merge together, you could get all sorts of interesting three-dimensional shapes. And so there's a lot going on in making the variety of galaxies in this image. And so what we'd really like to be able to do is tell a computer how it works and let a computer simulate what happens. And so this is something that I work on. We tell a computer what the early universe was like, that there were some places that had a little more stuff than others. We tell the computer about how much normal matter there is, how much dark matter. We tell the computer about gravity. We tell it about stars and supernovas. And then we let the computer run all that physics forward, and we see what we get. And ideally, we'll know that our simulations are on the right track if we end up with a variety of galaxies that matches what we see in images like this. And ideally, we'd even be able to learn something about how our own galaxy in particular might have formed. And that's my talk.
All right, so we have some time for some questions and some answers. Because it's being live streamed, when somebody asks a question, do you mind repeating it so we can, you see what I'm trying to say?
Can you see the Milky Way with like a household telescope, or do you need
So the question was, can you see the Milky Way with a household telescope, or do you need a university telescope? So it's going to depend a little on where you are and how dark the sky is. But in general, sometimes if the sky is dark enough, you can see it with the naked eye and just take pictures of it with a normal camera. So yes, you could definitely see it with a household telescope.
So the Milky Way, is spiraling, and you said it's moving. What is rotating around?
Great question. So the question was, if the Milky Way is spinning, what's it rotating around? So we think that at the center of pretty much every galaxy, and in particular the Milky Way, is a gigantic black hole. And so a black hole is a region of space that's so dense and so massive that even light can't escape it. And so the black hole at the center of the Milky Way is as heavy as about 1 million suns. And so that's what it's spinning around at the center.
How is your research coming along? Like, how are we close to being able to simulate all of this?
So the question was, are we close to being able to simulate all of this? So yes and no. We've learned we've learned a lot from simulations, but it turns out we're doing pretty well at understanding like the distribution of galaxies on large scales, but getting what happens inside a galaxy right is really, really difficult. And so we're still working on getting that part.
How do you get uranium from a galaxy to the Earth?
Hey, so the question was, how do you get uranium from a galaxy to the Earth? Great question. So the short answer is that if you have a star that explodes as a supernova, the bubble of the supernova, like you see here, is going to have some uranium in it. And so now, as this bubble expands, you're going to get a layer of really compressed gas on the edge, and so new stars can form out of that. And if planets form around those stars, then those new planets are going to have some of the uranium that came out of the supernova.
I think I saw a hand over this way. Oh, now we're eating food though. Back right over here.
Okay.
Do we know why we can't see dark matter?
Do we know why we can't see dark matter? Another great question. So the short answer is no. Physicists are spending a lot of time and energy trying to figure out what dark matter is. We have lots of good ideas, but so far we haven't found any conclusive evidence. We really know it's there from the effects it has on gravity, but we haven't been able to detect it interacting with normal matter yet. So we have some pretty good limits on things that it can't be, but we don't know what it is yet.
This gentleman right over here, VIP. Yes, you.
So, why is there such a tendency towards space stuff to find itself in spinning disks? Solar systems and galaxies and all that. How come it's doing that?
Yes. Okay. So awesome question. The question was, why is there such a tendency for space stuff to find itself in spinning disks? Okay. Have you ever watched ice skating? So you know how when an ice skater is doing a spin, they start with their arms out, and then they pull them inwards and start spinning faster? So exactly the same thing happens in space. So if there's any rotation at the beginning, as something collapses inwards due to gravity, it naturally starts to spin faster for exactly the same reason that ice skaters do. And so that process naturally creates spinning disks.
And I think we'll take our last question right over here.
How do you see
So the question was, how do you see AI helping in these discoveries of how galaxies form? Another really interesting question. So I think a lot of what it can do is that, these simulations involve a lot of physics, so they take a lot of computing power, and so AI could potentially, you could basically run a really large simulation and use AI to learn some of the patterns and then run something much cheaper that's emulating it. So I think that's one of the main uses of, you can run a complicated simulation once and then emulate it.
All right, let's give it up for David. Thank you very much, David. So we got about 10 minutes here. Please grab a drink, use the restroom. We'll give you a little bit of break time. We'll be back here at 7:40 with our next speaker, okay? Thank you.
Oh no, it's that bossy girl, and now she's up here to boss y'all again to say, come back, it's time for Nerd Nite to begin again. I am very excited to welcome our next speaker, particularly because he gets a gold star for me saying 2 weeks before Nerd Nite, hey, I need a third speaker, and I know you like interesting things. Will you come? And he said yes. Jody is a longtime AADL public librarian. I know, we love librarians. Where he shops for, catalogs, prints, teaches, answers, makes, and occasionally breaks many different things. Sounds like a librarian. He once set off the downtown library's fire alarms 2 hours after closing. And they were really cool about it, because the library is really cool. And you know who else is? Jody Harnish. Join me in welcoming Jody. here at 8:15. See you soon. All right, we're back. We've got a real treat for this last talk. I'm so excited to welcome Esteban Tuma. He works for Babbel Language Learning, which, if like me, you're like, oh, the podcast. I know those ads. And he's also a stand-up, a teacher. He does all sorts of cool things. And tonight, the cool thing he's going to do is teach us all about the Spanish conquest, but also, I bet, make us laugh a little. So join me in welcoming Esteban.
Thanks so much. Keep it going for Emily, everybody, and David and Jody for presenting tonight. Oh my God, I'm so excited to be here at live. I can't believe I'm in a club. I can't wait to tell people tomorrow, like, hey, I had the club's whole attention for 20 minutes. It's going to be pretty exciting. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Spanish conquest. How exciting is that? Yay. Yeah, so in college, my research was about like the interaction between the Americas and Spain. And I'm very interested in this period of time. And the two things that are very, very interesting to me about this time is, first of all, the silence of the native populations that went through this process, because all of the history we have is only from the side of Spain, and it's also from the side of these people who were going into the Americas with a very specific purpose. So their voices are a little bit stained by this purpose, right? And so like we don't really know how these native people felt, and all we have is this like collective pain from our native populations. And the other thing that fascinates me is what fascinates to a lot of people who study history is like this notion of like, is history like, things happen because they're supposed to happen, like the stage was set for these things to happen, or is this like an individual person and their actions what causes the aspects of history to happen, especially when these people are idiots, as we will talk about today, because some people are idiots and they get their say into what happens in history. And so today we'll talk a little bit about that. When I pitched this story, I was going to talk about how stupid, Columbus and Cortés and Pizarro were, but I didn't even reach to the first voyage of Columbus because there's so many idiots in this whole presentation. So I'm gonna limit myself a little bit, and I'm gonna introduce to you my first two idiots of the night, which are the King Ferdinand II of Aragon and Queen Isabella of Castile, and they are known as the Los Reyes Católicos, or the Catholic King and Queen of Spain. And he's from Aragon, that's kind of like central Spain, and Queen Isabella of Castile is kind of like eastern, what we know about Spain now. And they got married, and they kind of like unified what we today know as Spain. There was no Spain at the time. There was just like all these separated kingdoms. But their marriage kind of like combines these two things together and kind of starts this notion of like, hey, are we a nation? Are we like a thing? You know what I mean? So like they kind of like start the whole movement of it, right? Which is kind of like pretty cool. They're like obsessed with Catholicism. That's their main thing, as you can tell by their name. That's their main ideology. They're cousins, by the way. Hot. Not really. They're cousins, and so the other thing is like also they're cousins, and like when they get married, they need special permission from the Pope to get married because they're cousins. Is not the nicest thing to do. The Pope at the time says, I don't like that very much, so they fake their papal permission to get married, and they get married by doing that. So an incredible way to start this like ideology of like, oh, we're Catholics, but like, and they're about to have the most incredible year ever. Like if you ask them, like, what was the best year of your kingdom? They're absolute 100% immediately, they're both gonna say, the 1492, right? They're gonna be like so excited to tell you that it's 1492, and you probably have heard about this year, and you think, oh yeah, that's gonna be a great year for them. Not for the reasons you think of. Okay, they do not give a shit about this Italian guy with a weird accent who just discovered a handful of islands far, far away. They don't care about that. 1492 is a huge year for them because there's a huge amount of things that happened that year for them. First of all, you know, the Inquisition, and I put an exclamation mark because it's the Inquisition. You gotta, Inquisition, you know, it's a big thing. The Spanish Inquisition has been happening in Spain for several years. Started in 1487, I believe. By their purpose, and the idea is this notion of the purity of faith. They want Spain to be pure of faith, and there's a lot of Arabic people in Spain. There's a lot of Jewish people in Spain. There's a lot of pressure for them to convert, and a lot of them do convert, but they're like, oh, all right, I guess I'm a Catholic, you know? And so they're kind of like trying to hide a little bit their personal religion, and the Inquisition is a way to inquire if they are really doing that or not, right? So it's like really intense. But mainly 1492 is the end of what is called the Reconquista, or the Reconquest. I don't know if you know this, but the Arabic kingdoms have pushed up in the Iberian Peninsula. They've been there since the 1700, since the year 700, right? And slowly these Catholic kingdoms have gotten together, and they've started like expelling them in a series of conflicts. By 1492, the only kingdom that is left is the Kingdom of Granada in the south of Spain. And they are alone. They no longer have resources to fight a war or anything. And Spain is letting them exist as they are because they're paying a very hefty tribute to be there. So the Granada Kingdom is paying a lot of money for them. But they decided in 1492, you know what? Enough. You are gone. We are the Catholic king and queen. You're out of here. Which is idiots, dumb, right? Because they're losing a bunch of money by doing this, right? They're like, oh, we're Catholic. We're losing money for doing this because we no longer have this thing. Now we have to take care of all the people and all the things that are happening in that thing. So they kick them out. But the queen is so excited about this. We kick them out. And so, you know what? Let's do the same with our Jewish population. And so right after that happens, the queen gives all of the Jewish people in the Iberian Peninsula one month, to decide whether they want to convert into Catholicism or get out of Spain, which is like a huge, imagine that, right? It's such a horrible thing. So they do this, and also another incredibly dumb move, right? Because the Jewish population in Spain has been there for years, and they're merchants, they are doctors, they're physicians. Actually, the physicians of the king and queen, they're convert Jewish physicians, right? And so like they're present in all aspects of civilian life in Spain, and they're kicked out. And they also have like a lot of knowledge. They have a lot of connections with the Arabic world and with the Near East world. And so suddenly when a lot of them leave, Spain loses that. Now suddenly there's like a void of these incredible minds that have to leave the country. And also, so now they're like in big money issues now, right? Like they lost all of these people. And what sounds like pretty cool news, right? Also, 1492, the first Spanish grammar is the birth of what you would call Spanish, really, right? We call it Castellano, or Castilian would be the language that becomes Spanish. This is the first kind of like time that is like, it's actually called Español, is the thing that unifies the whole region and kind of like starts the notion of like, oh, we are a group. It sounds pretty cool. It's also the first like European language grammar ever, right? The first Spanish grammar. And you're like, oh, okay, well, these kind of suck, right? This one is kind of like fun. They ask the author, why? Why do you do this? Oh, after your highness has subjected barbarous peoples and nations of varied tongues, with conquest will come the need for them to accept the laws that the conqueror imposes on the conquered, and among them our language. So actually the purpose of this grammar is like, hey, we can force people to learn our language, right? This is not even near October, so this is like kind of like a spoiler alert for what's going to happen in the year, right? but they're broke. They just like wasted all of these things in this like crazy Catholic ideology. They don't have money. They don't know what to do. Who is going to help them to get money to get their kingdom, their Catholic kingdom, going? What can they do besides pray? They did that a lot. They don't know. We don't know who is going to save us. Oh, I wonder who is going to try to save us. Let's meet this idiot number 3. So Christopher Columbus was like a Genoese. He's like Italian, as you may know. And he's Genoese, so he's like, he grows up among boats. He's a sailor. He's like an incredible sailor. He's really good at sailing, right? But he's good at sailing in like a natural way. He's like kind of like a let's turn right here kind of guy. He has no idea how to use like, an astrolabe and all of the tools, the scientific tools of navigation. He's just like naturally an incredible sailor. And he's mainly a self-educated man. He has humble origins. He's obsessed with his own, his name. He wants to be a noble, even though he wasn't born there. But he studies a lot. He doesn't have a regular education, which is, it's great if you study on yourself. The problem is like you need to know what you're reading, right? And he reads a lot of books, and because he's an idiot, he 100% believes everything he reads. So here's some of the readings that he does. First of all, he reads Marco Polo's travels, which happened in 1200s, right? 200 years before his time. And he reads about this king, Kublai Khan, who is like in the middle of the Mongolian kingdom, and he reads about how Marco Polo finds him, and there's so many riches, and so he's obsessed with finding the same place, and not only the same place, the same king. He talks to the king and queen, saying like, yeah, when I go there and I'll meet the king, it's like. If he's there, he's like 250 years old. You know what? Like, what are you doing? But he's an idiot, so he doesn't care. The other thing he reads is Ptolemy's. I don't know if this is kind of like a psychology thing, and I should just say Ptolemy or Ptolemy, but let's say Ptolemy. The Ptolemy's geography, who wrote this book in 150 AD, right, where he very grossly miscalculated the circumference of the Earth. By the way, everybody in Europe by the 1400s know that the Earth is round, okay? Columbus didn't go out to be like, I'm going to prove it. Everybody knows it. There's no need to prove it. That has nothing to do with this. Everybody knows. The only difference is that everybody thinks that is very big because they have a lot of scientists that have measured the Earth and know this. But Ptolemy says, actually it's like very short. He miscalculated it at 150. By 250 BC, Eratosthenes, right? You're okay. Good. I have a fact checker right here. He says like actually Ptolemy was wrong. So like even in Roman times, they know that this guy was wrong. But Columbus, he's like, oh, actually, it's so short to go to the Indies and the other side because Ptolemy knew it, right? And he's the only idiot who believes that. He is convinced that he was right and that the rest of the scientists were wrong. Columbus is basically like contemporary times, like the guy who's on Reddit reading conspiracy theories, right? Just like an echo chamber of just reassuring information that is wrong. So he's convinced that Ptolemy was right and that all of the other scientists are wrong, right? He also has a correspondence with Toscanelli, who was like an astronomer from Florence, who was also an idiot. And he tells Columbus, like, actually, you are absolutely right. Ptolemy and you are absolutely right. Go for it. You could actually reach the Indies from the other side. Every other scientist is. He's like, oh, the main. Toscanelli is kind of like the Joe Rogan of his time, right? He's like telling him, no, actually, the mainstream media is wrong. It's telling you that the Earth is bigger than it is. Ptolemy and you are right. So they write each other and they convince each other that they're both correct, even though everybody knows they are wrong, right? So he's convinced about this, and so he starts kind of like, oh, this is a possibility to go around the earth, go to the Indies, to the other side, right? The Indies are a very desired place to do trade. He also reads the travels of Sir John Mandeville that narrates this navigator that goes to what they call the Indies and describes this like amazing amount of riches and creatures, and it's just like a beautiful narrative of it. It's complete fiction. It's like invented, right? But he, of course, he's like on Reddit being like, this is actually true, this happened, right? Absolutely convinced that this is true. But it's actually fictional work. And speaking of fictional works, okay, not necessarily, that's why we have, it's, what I mean, what I want to say is that he believes in the Bible as factual truth, right? So when he reads passages about the Bible, he believes that it's 100% truth. So when he starts discovering all of the islands in the Americas, he actually believes that, oh, this is probably where Eden is, right? And he's like starts kind of like quoting some parts of the Bible as like, oh, this is actually where the things are, right? He believes in that very consciously. This is an image of Marco Polo's travels with his annotations. He would write down in these books. He had a bunch of books all written down and annotated with a lot of stupid notes. So let's jump a little bit ahead of time and I want to read this quote. Speaking of the Bible, okay, right? He's convinced that Eden exists. So this is by like the third or fourth voyage. He says, I have always read that the world, land and water, was spherical, as the authority and reason of Ptolemy, idiot, and all others declare. But I have found the western part to be not so. But its figure, he thinks the earth, is like a very round pear, which has a raised projection, more like a woman's nipple on one side. And I believe that the earthly paradise is in the highest point of it, at which point a man cannot arrive by reason of the waters, which descend to it in torrents. And I believe that no one can reach there, as I have said, except by God's will. These are the narratives of the guy that we built statues. He's an idiot, right? Very stupid man. Convinced, and this, as you can tell, this is also a narrative that he has created about the Earth's shape, based on what we don't even know. He's just a rambling dude coming up with these crazy things. Let's jump ahead of time a little bit to the 1600s, and this is my good friend Miguel de Cervantes. Do you guys know Miguel de Cervantes? Yeah, have you heard of him? Yes. If you're a Spanish speaker, this is our Shakespeare, right? He was pretty awesome, and he wrote a great book called Don Quixote de la Mancha. Have you guys heard about Don Quixote? You've probably heard. It's this old guy who fights windmills or something, right? The story of Don Quixote is the story of an old man who reads so many books, old books about this old chivalry age with this like weird ideologies of chivalry and God, and he is consumed by them so much that he becomes crazy and starts to pretend that he believes that he is a knight that has re-emerged in this time, and the book is kind of like a joke about how that conviction and that ideology, that old ideology, doesn't have really an echo or a reality in the real world, right? Which is such a poignant thing when you think about Columbus and when you think about the Spanish conquest in the Americas, right? So kind of like a reflection of why Cervantes was not one of the idiots tonight. So highly recommend reading Don Quixote, but it kind of like showcases that notion of how the conquest and this period of time is guided by these principles of Catholicism and religion and an ideology that doesn't really have an echo on reality and the implications of what that causes, right? All right, so Columbus obsessed with this notion of like going to the Indies through the West, right? And so he goes to this freaking awesome dude. Look at this guy. He is a badass. I want to have that belt. I want to stand like that. I don't know too much of him, to be honest with you, but I will not call him an idiot today because I'm not sure. I think he's kind of cool. He at least knows a thing or two. Columbus goes to him and he's like, "Hey, listen, I have the perfect plan to go to the Indies through the West, right?" And he's like, "You know what? I'm gonna say no because I am not an idiot, right?" And because he's not an idiot. Portuguese. A lot of people, when they talk about this moment in history, they tend to think like, "Oh my God, I can't believe King Joao would say no. Can you imagine how much he regretted it?" He never regretted it in his life because it's the dumbest thing to go to the Indies through the West, right? First of all, Portugal already has an incredible system going through the tip of South Africa into the Indies. They have that nailed down. Why would they need another way to go, a harder way to go to the Indies? Second of all, he is aware of all of the calculations. He listens to his scientists who tell him like his calculations are absolutely wrong. He has no idea what he's talking about. So he knows Columbus is off by like half of what he's saying of where the Indies are. And the Portuguese have managed to build incredible boats that use what is called lateen. Is this like triangular sails? So that means that they can sail against the wind, which is a huge thing. And they are able to build these huge boats that can sail against the wind. So they can sail against the wind, but he knows that he's not an idiot enough to go west with them, okay? Because sailors at that time, they can sail against the wind, but they prefer to start their trip sailing against the wind because of the Coriolis effect, meaning that near the equator, the air goes from west to east. So if you get trapped, if you're sailing, you want to sail against the wind first, because if you have any problems, if you have a storm or whatever, you can go back with the wind, okay? Only idiots would do the opposite with the boats that they have at the time, right? So he's like, "No, you're an idiot. Get out of here." So he goes to Spain. So he decides, okay, well, King Joao doesn't work. He goes to Spain. In 1487, he meets all of the high people of Spain, and he tells them, "Hey, I have this plan." They analyze his plan, and they realize in 1487 that his plan is not going to work. And they tell the kings like, "Hey, this Columbus guy, he's wrong. He's not correct." But still, they're like, "All right." So in 1492, they have an incredible year. They're probably high on all of the things that they're doing. So they're like, let the guy go. Come on, it's like, come on, it's okay. So he presents again his plan, and at this point, the experts have told him like he's wrong. They already have said no to him. They know that the King of Portugal has said no to him. But they say yes this time, right? Why? Because there's not a lot they can lose, right? They're like, everybody tells us he's wrong, but what if he's right? Right? What if he's right? The main thing that kind of like puts the perspective into them of that, what if he's right, is something that Columbus says to King Ferdinand, okay? And that goes, and that is like a fundamental part of the conquest of the Americas. He says like, first of all, you're strapped for cash. Portugal is beating you, getting all of these riches from the east. All of these other nations are doing that. You have no access to that. You kicked all of the people who would have any kind of connection to those lands. So I can give you access to it. But second of all, it could be the start of you already did the reconquest of the Iberian Peninsula in the name of Catholicism. Maybe you can do again another crusade and go to Jerusalem and I believe you are the king who will conquer Jerusalem for Catholicism. And at this, he smiles, right? He writes down that he smiled a little bit. And that's how they gave him permission to do this, right? This ideology, this dream, this fantasy of pushing this ideology into them. So they decide to go. Let me see where I am in my notes in case I'm missing something. Oh yeah, so their contract is very loose, right? For they're like, Columbus is like, all I want is for you to name me Admiral of the High Seas and give me all the lands I get. And they're like, yeah, sure, whatever, right? It's like a very loose contract, which is going to be a problem afterwards because they're going to get into a lot of kind of like legal problems. But anyway, the crew, they got the crew. Who signs up to go into this like stupid mission? The answer is a bunch of idiots, right? But it's the only people who are available to do this, right? And they hate him. They really dislike him because he doesn't know. Am I running on? Okay, I'm hurrying up. All right. All right, yeah, we're gonna call it quit. One of the things I'll say about one of the people they get is a guy who speaks Hebrew and Arabic because they think like, oh, that's gonna be handy. Stupid idiots. And so Columbus is obsessed. I'll quickly say Columbus is obsessed with gold, as you probably know, right? Why is he obsessed with gold? Because that's what he promised the king and queen that they will find, right? And because gold is the tool to get to Jerusalem, right? And so when he gets there, he doesn't find this, right? And so he will die convinced that this was not a new continent. He reaches these islands and he's like, oh, this is Japan. And he makes all of his sailors swear this is Japan. Swear this is Japan. And they're like, okay, we swear this is Japan. And he puts a flag down and says like, this is Japan. And that's how he dies. He dies convinced that he actually reached the East Indies. And so, well, let's jump ahead to the end. If I highly recommend this confusing book, but it's really good from Svetan Todorov, who talks about the question of the other, this otherness, right? The idea of like how we identify as ourselves and how we see other people, right? And he talks about this moment about how with Columbus, our modern life, our modern era begins, this notion of how we see each other. Because with Columbus, the world kind of shrinks. We kind of understand now that we understand the whole of the world with Columbus, the whole as in our identity, and our modern sense of identity starts from this moment, right? So he says that we're all descendants of Columbus in that sense. And the main problems we have of our identity and the main problems we establish from our authority and how we establish power comes from this moment, right? And so that's kind of like the notion or the idea that I wanted to share, this notion that this ideology that they have, even though it doesn't have an echo in reality, is being pushed so strongly, despite the fact that there is no evidence and no reality to it, in a way that causes so much damage and destruction. And with that being said, please vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Esteban. Thank you, everybody, for coming out this evening. Thank you, Jody. Thank you, David. Keep that applause going. Our next Nerd Night is November the 14th. Can you believe that? November. If you or somebody that you know would like to perhaps give a Nerd Night talk, please go ahead and Google Nerd Night Ann Arbor. You'll find an email address. Email that email address. Now, a new event is starting here at 9 p.m. If you would like to stay here, you are more than welcome to, but you should probably go over there and pay some cover. On your way out, please tip, tip, tip those bartenders.